Hello everyone, welcome back to Plaza Club. I'm Brother Chi. This episode is a bit of a special one because quite a few listeners, whether they're traveling or here for work, have ended up in Germany and dropped me a message to see if we could meet up for a bowl of wonton noodles. Unfortunately, we always seem to miss each other. People can't help but ask, aren't you living in Berlin long term? So where exactly do you live? It's true that Berlin is one of the places where I live long term, but of course, it's not the only one. In fact, our small business. Our business is also spread across different European countries, and even beyond Europe, so I travel for work frequently. Today, I want to talk to you all about how the concept of immigration from the last century is already outdated. I still remember back in the day, when we used to see people off at the airport, everyone would cry their eyes out, as if it were a final farewell, because once you passed through the gate, no one knew when you'd be back. But of course, that's not the case anymore. Now we have WhatsApp, people in mainland China have WeChat, and there are all sorts of different communication tools. As soon as someone lands, you can already FaceTime them. You know exactly what transport they're taking and where they're heading. So the world today is very different from how it used to be. Now, if you're abroad and want to watch Hong Kong programs or binge watch mainland dramas, you can do that. Watching Netflix is even easier, no problem at all. In other words, your entertainment options are worlds apart from those of people in the last century. Back then, people earning a living were often tied to their restaurants or couldn't leave their companies. But that's not the case anymore. Now, everyone carries a laptop or a mobile phone, and wherever you go, you can earn a living. So, in the past 10 years, a new model has emerged, called the digital nomad. But as nomads, there's always a sense of having no fixed abode, a bit like a wandering bird at the feet of the herd, sometimes feeling very lonely. So, a few years ago, an advanced model was invented, called digital nomad guilds. Don't underestimate these guilds, whether big or small. They actually play a very, very significant role, because nowadays, as everyone knows, there are a few things you simply can't avoid. First, you can't avoid having a mobile phone number, even though nowadays, although ESIMs are now in use, for many local regulations, if you don't even have a locally verified SIM card, you can't open a bank account or use local communication apps, or even payment systems. So, in other words, having a local address and a local SIM card is extremely important. If you go a step further and are able to obtain local residency, then that's a game changer, because once you have residency status, in theory, your status is no different from that of a local resident. Except for voting. But the most important point is, after we've moved away from the old concept of immigration, what do we actually gain? What we gain is a life of freedom. And when we talk about freedom here, at the very least, we're referring to 5 different kinds of freedom. The first, and very important one, is indeed freedom of speech. If you look around the world today, whether it's the Chinese Communist Party, today's America, or even the UK, what do you see? Do you really have freedom? If you write a couple of sentences that are deemed inappropriate, they say they want to silence you, stop you from working, or even refuse you entry. But if you have multiple identities, do they really have a way to make things difficult for you? I'm afraid it's hard for them to do so. More importantly, why did Brother Chi take this step in the first place? It's all about tax freedom. My own income, of course, is private, whether it's overseas investment returns, selling a property abroad, or even selling some Bitcoin. Even YouTube earnings, after US taxes are deducted, are considered overseas income. So how can you avoid being taxed on all that? Is it possible not to pay global tax? The simplest way is to spend 90 days in each place. So, if you have 4 places, Basically, you don't have to pay any tax for the whole year. You might say, I don't have that much energy. What about just 2 places? Well, it depends on the country. If it's the UK, that might not work. That's because, since April this year, the UK has started imposing global tax. They're just giving you a grace period now, a few years to slowly move your money back. Of course, you wouldn't fall for that. Who would be that foolish in the real world? So, the smart ones have already left. Over the past year, about 20,000 wealthy people have left the UK. And in terms of tax revenue, those 20,000 people are equivalent to about 400,000 average taxpayers. That's how significant it is. So, whether it's the Conservatives, starting with Sunak, or now Labour when they implement it, both parties are basically clueless. As the saying goes, the higher the wall, the taller the ladder. Taxation has always been a game of hide and seek. Do you have your own clever tricks? Accountants naturally have their own long ladders, don't they? Do you really think you can catch them all? But the UK's SRT, the Statutory Residence Test, is actually very complicated. Strictly speaking, if you have 2 or 3 ties, you could easily. The amount of time you can stay in the UK might be as little as just over 40 days, or maybe only 90 days. It's not fixed. So, just having 2 places isn't enough. For example, if you stay in Berlin for more than 180 days, you'll end up having to pay Germany's worldwide tax. In other words, if you go over the limit, get a bit greedy, and don't plan things carefully, from an income tax perspective, you could end up paying 0 tax. Of course, that's not counting VAT, which you'd have to pay if you're running a business. That's a given. But there are many different directions you can take. Actually, for someone like me, VAT has never been some terrifying monster. It's really not that bad. It's actually quite fun. The third kind of freedom is what I call freedom at work. For example, in our accounting field, nowadays all the accounting systems are online. That means your ledgers, your supporting documents, bank statements, and even your bank accounts are now directly linked to your software. So, as long as you have staff in different countries, they can make money for you every day. For example, being a YouTuber is a very popular profession. Brother Chi was lucky enough to get into the industry by chance. There are indeed many young people, or some good-looking guys and girls, who often show up in our startup center nowadays. If you're just doing paperwork in a co-working space, that's no problem. But if you want to do video production, it gets tricky, because filming requires lighting. You need lighting, you need a proper setup, and there's a lot of editing involved. That's why quite a few people in the same industry have told Brother Chi that they currently don't like using startup centers anymore. They'd rather set up a small workshop, and once they've used it for a while, they might as well sell it off and even make a profit. Quite a few people have said, what if I get a color van or a camper van? Would that work? Well, it could, but that's still an expense. If you buy a small workshop is different. A small workshop appreciates in value. Touch wood, but so far, all our workshops have made money. It's just a matter of how much profit, whether more or less. And there's another thing. Freedom. For young people, or for single people, it's even more romantic, the freedom in relationships. This kind of emotional freedom. Older folks are out of the picture, but for many people, being able to develop a long-distance relationship is indeed quite romantic. How long it can last, no one dares to guarantee. Maybe you want to keep it going, or maybe you don't want to. Of course, this is more or less related to gig work. And finally, the last point, this is the last thing that comes to mind, but everyone can add to it, is that by living this kind of lifestyle, actually you are constantly living in a paradise, away from the world. Many people ask, what is the point of living, really? If we say that life is made up of a limited number of years, Then why don't we use that limited time to see more of the world? Is Hong Kong really all there is to the world? Is Paris really all there is to the world? So in recent years, quite a few digital nomads have started calling themselves part of the FIRE movement. FIRE, F-I-R-E, doesn't mean people who play with fire, of course. It stands for financial independence and retire early. Naturally, everyone will ask, Brother Chi, when you choose a job, what standards do you use to make your choice? Today, Brother Chi is practicing, and there are 2 or 3 points worth your reference. One is to avoid war, because now Europe is in a state of war, and Poland has been attacked by drones. If you want to stay away from war, it is not only a security issue, but also an economic issue. Because once a war breaks out, even the property prices in that area will plummet. If you don't want to lose, try to avoid the war zone. It is best to choose a neutral country because neither side will attack it. The second condition is that the economy is only growing rapidly, and those people are very willing to have children, that is, those who can have 3 or 4 children in a family. Those are called rapid growth, right? There's a huge demand for housing, so it's best to choose places with tourist attractions, sunshine, and beaches. It's best to have a variety of international cuisines. Today, Japanese food, tomorrow, Thai food. It's not rare, it's really happening. We're enjoying it now, so using the older generation's concept of immigration is outdated in today's world. What we really need to do is pursue a free life, whether it's freedom of speech, taxation, work, or emotion. We can even say we want to escape to the world and live in seclusion. Don't you think that's better? That's all Brother Chi has to say about today. 此刻雖返故鄉，環境已變，但我依舊美。讓時日走，心意逗留未收，盼不需諸多藉口，仍可以共你並遊。尚記得彼此同河，互伴我哼歌。 共你說不會淡忘，如此開心過，既難自控。望樹萍水相逢，我看得很重。在來日我不懂打算，但這晚與你可出現，與你能到多天，那便多天。 日後如若覺得討厭，你也便再不出現。但願仍能記住那共聚片段。 共當遊異鄉，景致異神共享。此刻雖返故鄉，環境已變，但我依舊美。讓時日走，心意逗留未收，盼不需諸多藉口，仍可以約會你並遊。 瀑布便輕輕走過，林內穿梭，剎那間把你拉近，提星輕閃過，既難自控。望樹萍水相逢，我看得很重。在來日我不懂打算。 但這晚與你可出現，與你能到多天，那便多天。日後如若覺得討
也便再不出現，但願仍能記住那共聚片段。在來日我不懂打算，但這晚與你可出現，與你能度多天，那便多天。日後如若覺得討厭，你也便再不出現，但願仍能記住那共聚片段。共當遊異鄉，景致異神共享。